Welcome to Restorative Living. Today, let's listen to a true story of a sister who was shown by Jesus Christ what tithing really is. Let's get into it.
I never imagined that my life would take such a dramatic turn on what seemed like an ordinary Sunday. I was in church, as always, seated in my favorite pew, right in the middle of the sanctuary, where the choir's harmony felt like heaven touching earth. The sermon that morning was about tithing, a subject I'd heard countless times. "Give your 10% to God," the pastor thundered, quoting Malachi 3:10. His words stirred a mix of guilt and obligation in my chest. Just as they always did, I was diligent about my tithe, even when it strained my finances. After all, I believed that I was securing my blessings, right? I had always considered myself a good person. I attended church regularly, helped in the community, and did my best to treat others kindly. But deep down, if I'm honest, my relationship with God felt transactional, like a checklist of religious obligations. Among those, tithing was my proudest achievement. I gave my 10% faithfully. Then came the day that shattered everything I thought I knew about life, death, and God. It was an ordinary afternoon. I was driving home after running errands when the accident happened. A truck ran a red light, slamming into my car with terrifying force. I barely registered the screech of tires and the shattering of glass before everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. I was standing in an endless expanse of light. The warmth of the light wrapped around me like a comforting embrace, yet I felt exposed, as though every secret of my soul was laid bare. Suddenly I saw him, Jesus. His presence was overwhelming. He radiated love and authority in a way that words cannot fully capture. He didn't need to introduce himself. I knew instantly who he was. My knees buckled, and I fell before him, trembling. I tried to speak, to explain myself, but my words caught in my throat. Jesus looked at me with eyes that seemed to pierce through every layer of my being. I felt both loved and unworthy in his gaze. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked gently, his voice like a melody and a command all at once. I couldn't answer. I didn't know what to say. "Let me show you," he said. In an instant, my life played out before me like a vivid movie. Every moment, every decision, every thought was laid bare. I saw the times I'd been kind, but also the countless times I'd ignored someone in need because it was inconvenient. I saw the pride I'd taken in my acts of service, not because they glorified God, but because they made me feel superior. My tithing, the one thing I'd been so proud of, was revealed as a hollow ritual done out of obligation rather than love or faith. "You have misunderstood," Jesus said, his tone firm but not condemning. "Tithing is not about money, it's about trust. It's about your heart." My heart broke. Tears streamed down my face as I realized how far I had strayed from truly knowing him. "You have been given much," Jesus continued, "but you have withheld yourself. Now I will show you what you have missed." Before I could ask what he meant, the light around me shifted, and I was plunged into an experience that would change me forever. Suddenly, I found myself in a place so beautiful it took my breath away. Colors I had never seen before danced across the sky. The air was alive with a harmony of sounds, as though the wind itself was singing praises. I saw people, their faces radiant with joy and peace, worshiping together in perfect unity. There was no pain, no sorrow, only an overwhelming sense of belonging and love. I wanted to stay there forever. Every fiber of my being longed to be part of that heavenly worship. But even as I stood there, I felt a gentle pull, a reminder that I wasn't ready. Jesus stood beside me again, his expression tender. "This is what I desire for all my children," he said, "but not everyone understands what it means to live for me. They cling to rituals and rules, but their hearts are far from me." As he spoke, I saw glimpses of people I knew on earth. Some were faithful servants, their lives marked by selfless love and humility. Others, like me, had focused on outward appearances, while neglecting the deeper call to surrender their hearts fully to God. It was painful to see myself in that second group, but the truth was undeniable. Jesus' words echoed in my spirit. "It's not about what you give, it's about how you live." True worship is a life poured out in love and obedience. Before I could respond, the scene changed again, and I was drawn into a darker, more sobering reality. I was in a place of utter despair. The light and joy of heaven were gone, replaced by a suffocating darkness. I heard cries and wails all around me, each one filled with regret and anguish. Shadows moved in the distance, figures trapped in endless torment. The air was thick with the weight of selfishness, pride, and unrepentance. "This is what it means to live apart from me," Jesus said, his voice filled with sorrow. "When you hold back your heart, when you live for yourself, this is the fruit of that life." I wanted to look away, to escape the overwhelming sadness of what I was witnessing, but Jesus held my gaze. He wasn't showing me this to punish me, but to awaken me to the reality of my choices. "You cannot serve two masters," he said. "You must choose." As he spoke, I felt the weight of my own selfishness. My priorities, my pride, my need for control, they had kept me from fully surrendering to him. I had been blind to the true cost of my half-hearted faith. But there is hope. Jesus said, his voice breaking through the darkness like a beam of light. "You have been given another chance." With those words, I was back in the light. Jesus stood before me, his hand extended. "I am giving you a choice," he said. "You can return to your life and live it for me, or you can continue as you were and miss the fullness of what I have for you." The weight of his offer was overwhelming. I knew I didn't deserve another chance, yet his love for me was undeniable. I fell to my knees again, tears streaming down my face. "Lord, I choose you," I whispered. "I don't want to live for myself anymore. Teach me how to live for you." Jesus smiled, his expression full of joy and compassion. "Go and tell others what you have seen. Help them understand that I desire their hearts, not their rituals. Remind them that true worship is a life surrendered in love." With those words, the light around me grew brighter, and I felt myself being pulled back to my body. I woke up in the hospital, my body aching but alive. The doctors were amazed that I had survived the crash, calling it a miracle. But I knew the real miracle was what had happened to my soul. From that day forward, my life was transformed in ways I could never have imagined. At first, I struggled with how to begin. The weight of what I had seen and experienced was almost too much to put into words. But I knew Jesus' command. I was to share this message, no matter how difficult it might be. It has been years since I experienced that life-altering encounter with Jesus. The day I died and returned with a new understanding of tithing, of faith, and of life itself. At the time, the shift was so monumental that I couldn't see the full scope of it. I couldn't comprehend the depth of the lessons I had been shown. But now, as I look back, I realize just how much that moment changed me. Not only in my approach to giving, but in how I live, breathe, and interact with the world. The years following my encounter with Jesus were filled with growth, pain, and understanding. At first, I struggled. I struggled with how to integrate what I had learned into my life without completely alienating myself from everything I had known. I had always been a part of a church community where tithing was treated as an obligation, a sacred duty that marked your righteousness. Everyone around me still operated within that system. But now I knew the truth. And the truth was not just about money. It was about the condition of the heart. I began to dig into the scriptures, to look deeper into the word for answers. Jesus had shown me that tithing was never about the money, never about the 10% we were taught to give. It wasn't a formula that would unlock blessings or guarantee favor. It was never meant to be a transactional relationship with God. The truth I was learning was much deeper than I had ever imagined. As I sat in my quiet moments with God, I began to understand the bigger picture of what Jesus had been trying to tell me. Tithing was an expression, a symbol of something far more important, my relationship with God. He wanted my heart. He wanted my trust. Giving wasn't about what I had to offer. It was about what I was willing to surrender. I spent hours in prayer asking for guidance, and as I did, the weight of the world I had built around tithing began to crumble. It had been such a part of my identity that I didn't realize how much pressure I had put on myself to meet that expectation. The pressure to give in the right way, the fear of not measuring up, the guilt that came with not doing it perfectly. Jesus showed me that he didn't need my perfect tithes. He wanted me to come to him as I was, broken and imperfect, trusting that he would provide everything I needed. And that was the turning point. When I let go of the concept that tithing was an obligation to check off my list, I was finally free. Free to give, not because I was scared of the consequences, but because I wanted to. I wanted to honor God with my life, not just with my money, but with my time, my energy, my thoughts, my words, and my actions. Giving was about trust and love, not about duty. The transformation was gradual. It was subtle at first, but it began to change the way I interacted with my community, with my church, and with my family. I started giving differently. Instead of setting aside a percentage of my income because it was expected, I gave in a way that felt more genuine. It was no longer a percentage, it was a reflection of my heart. I gave to people who needed it. I gave to causes that moved me. I gave to those in my community who were struggling. I gave because I wanted to show the love and compassion that God had shown me. But as my heart changed, so did the world around me. I started to see things through a new lens. I began to notice how the concept of tithing had been twisted in so many places. How it had become more about appearance and tradition than about true generosity. It was easy to see that many people, like me, had been caught in a cycle, giving without understanding, performing without meaning, hoping to appease God with acts that were disconnected from a deeper relationship with Him. One Sunday, I sat in church listening to a sermon about tithing. The pastor spoke about the importance of giving and the blessings that would come with it. It was the same message I had heard countless times before, but this time, something inside me stirred. I wanted to stand up and shout, "It's not about the money, it's about the heart, it's about love." But I knew I couldn't do that. The congregation wasn't ready to hear what I had learned. It was too much of a shock to the system. Instead, I sat quietly, reflecting on how far I had come. I also understood that not everyone was ready for the truth I had encountered. But I also knew that my journey wasn't meant to be the same as everyone else's. God had shown me the truth for a reason, and that reason wasn't just for me. It was for others too. As time passed, I began to share my story with those I trusted. At first, there was skepticism. People were resistant to what I was saying, and I couldn't blame them. I had once been in their shoes too. I had once believed that tithing was a transaction, a way to earn favor with God, and I had lived my life according to that belief. But now, I saw the flaws in that thinking, and I couldn't keep quiet about it. Slowly, one by one, people began to listen. At first, it was just a few close friends, but as I shared more, I saw hearts being transformed. They began to see that the truth wasn't about the amount of money we gave. It was about surrendering our hearts to God. It was about giving out of love, not out of fear. And as they began to understand this, their giving transformed too. It wasn't just a financial change. It was a spiritual awakening. I watched people begin to give with joy, not with reluctance. I saw them find peace in their generosity, knowing that they were offering not just their money, but their hearts to God. And for the first time, I truly understood what Jesus meant when He said that the kingdom of God is in the heart. It wasn't about the outward performance, it was about the inward transformation. I began to speak to larger groups about what I had learned. Some listened with open hearts, while others dismissed my words. But I didn't mind. I knew that I had to speak the truth, even if it wasn't popular. One day, I was asked to speak at a church event. The topic was about generosity, and I knew this would be my chance to share what I had learned about tithing. I was nervous about how people would react. But when I stood up to speak, I was filled with a peace that surpassed all understanding. I began to speak about the heart of giving, about how tithing wasn't just a financial transaction, but a reflection of our love for God and others. As I spoke, I could see the light bulb moments in people's eyes. They began to see that giving wasn't about giving to get something in return. It was about living a life of generosity, a life that reflected the love and grace of God. I shared how Jesus had shown me that tithing was an expression of trust and surrender, and that it wasn't limited to money. It was about giving our time, our attention, our love, to others, to the world, and most importantly, to God. When the message was over, people came up to me, expressing their gratitude and their newfound understanding. I knew that what I had shared had made a difference. But more than that, I knew that it was only the beginning. The truth was spreading, one heart at a time. Now looking back, I realize how far I've come. The journey hasn't been easy, and it's far from over, but I am no longer the person I was before. I no longer give because I have to. I give because I want to, because my heart has been transformed by the love of God. And I know that this is what Jesus meant when he spoke to me all those years ago. Tithing isn't what you think. It's so much more. It's about surrendering everything to God, not out of obligation, but out of love. When we give with our whole hearts, we reflect the love of Christ, and that, my friend, is the truest form of worship. The truth will set you free, and it has set me free.